Right, audience effects. Remember that audience effects as a topic is sometimes called social facilitation. Not a good title, because we should know that social facilitation means that performance improves in front of an audience. Social inhibition is the fact that performance worsens, it deteriorates in front of an audience. So we get a worse performance. So either can happen. So just be aware that sometimes the exam board, the question might talk about social facilitation in general, whereas actually it means both facilitation and inhibition, because both outcomes could occur. The first model we're going to look at is drive theory. You need to know this in and out, inside out. So what it says is that there are two types, passive others and interactive others. Now, these interactive others here, so your competitive co-actors are the people you're competing against, and social reinforcers might be people like your coach who are shouting encouragement and things like that. Now, Zion says that those interactive others are always there. So when you compete, they're always there. You're used to them being there, so they don't really impact on you in terms of social facilitation or inhibition. The ones who do impact are these passive people over here. So they are your audience. So again, they wouldn't always be there. So people watching, and co-actors are people who would be competing in a similar event, but not in direct competition. So this could be people on the next badminton court, for example. So they are still there. They still might be watching a bit of what's going on your court, therefore they could have an impact on what you're doing. So Zion suggests that those two types of people increase arousal. Alright, so that increases our arousal, and the rest of the theory is drive theory, which we know all about. Alright, so for drive theory of arousal, once arousal increases, dominant response takes over. Use your two examples that you should always talk about with drive theory about novices would perform worse, and therefore this would be social inhibition, in this case in front of an audience, whereas an expert's dominant response is a correct one, it's well learned, and therefore they will get social facilitation in front of an audience. Evaluation apprehension theory suggests that the main impact of an audience comes when the performer perceives that the audience is judging them. Alright, so they are evaluating your performance. So this could be if you know that it's a knowledgeable crowd, if you know that there are scouts in the crowd, if you know that there are important people to you as a performer in the crowd, like parents or friends or whatever. It could even just be you know that your coach is evaluating your performance. It could also be the fact that it might be on TV or being videoed, and you know that your performance is going to get evaluated by other people, or maybe by the coach in a team meeting watching the video in training the next week. Distraction conflict theory is more about attention. So recent research focuses on cognitive elements like what we pay attention to. So distraction conflict theory does what it says really. It suggests that there's an impact of the crowd in the fact that we get distracted by the crowd. Therefore, if we get distracted, again, we're not selectively attending to what I should be focusing on in terms of my performance. I'm thinking about what the crowd's chanting at me, or the noise, or I get distracted by something I see in the crowd. Therefore, I'm not 100% concentrating, and therefore my performance might suffer because of that. So this could be away crowds would try to distract you away from your performance by booing you, or waving their arms, or whatever it might be. Research suggests there is a home advantage. Stats tell us that home teams win more. It's thought that home teams attack better, and that away teams defend more aggressively, get more people sent off, and that type of thing. Other things that can affect your performance in terms of the audience is the size of the crowd and the size of the stadium. So, for example, a small stadium that is full will have a big impact, but a large stadium that doesn't have many people in it will have less of an impact. How close, which is the proximity effect, how close the audience is, that can have an effect. So things like basketball, there's more of a proximity effect than things like American football or European football, where they have running tracks around the outside of the pitch. How much noise and how hostile the crowd are can also impact here. The other thing to bear in mind in front of an audience is what type of skill you're performing. So if you're performing a simple task, linking back to what we've talked about before, it might be easier, your performance should improve. Social facilitation. If we're performing a complex task, then performance tends to suffer social inhibition. So how do we cope with an audience? We can use selective attention. I always think using audience effects, use the theories. Alright, so selective attention looks at distraction conflict theory. I can try to block out the crowd. Alright, I can focus on the task that I'm trying to do so that I'm not going to get distracted. I could also do that with imagery. The other thing I can do is overlearn my skills so that my dominant response improves. My dominant response gets well learned, well grooved. Therefore, if I think about drive theory, Zion's theory, and when my dominant response kicks in because of the audience, then I'm going to perform better because it's a well learned response. I can also practice with the audience there. I can make myself used to having an audience there. So I would start with smaller crowds and build that up as weeks go on. I can also use my stretch management, my relaxation techniques. So I might need this, for example, when I feel I'm being evaluated in terms of evaluation apprehension. Attributions, I might not want to blame defeat on the fact that we were away from home, for example. Alright, so because players will then decide that that's a good enough excuse and we don't have to win when we're away from home.